we're good to go. Yeah, right. Hello, everyone. Very welcome. Hello. I just want to start by saying a few words of welcome, really, on behalf of IMMA, and to, I suppose, welcome everybody here who's here in person at IMMA, but also those people joining us online. It's great to see a great show up for tonight's discussion. I'm Sophie Byrne. I'm curator of talks and public programmes here at the Irish Museum of Modern Art, Dublin, and I head up IMMA's summer programme of events called IMMA Outdoors, which draws on current exhibitions and the rich holdings of the museum's collection to engage with a diverse set of communities within its programme of contemporary art. Over the summer, there is plenty to see and do here, with activities ranging from talks, workshops, yoga, music and performance for what makes a very vibrant site-wide activation at the IMMA grounds, gardens and galleries. Do check our website to get the latest news on our monthly rotating programme and this summer's full exhibition programme that features the major solo exhibition of works for the first time in Ireland by the phenomenal American artist, activist and educator Herardina Pindell, titled A Renewed Language, that newly opened at IMMA last week and certainly has a certain degree of synergy with the topic that we will be exploring this evening. Pindell's exhibition, I think, really does offer a prime example of how an artist's work deals with the challenging issues of race, gender, colonisation and enslavement and the AIDS crisis. Her work tackles racial inequality, drawing on Pindell's own experiences relating to segregation, discrimination and race-based violence in America. So having Pindell's exhibition here in Dublin at IMMA, I think, only further necessitates our ongoing engagement with feminist and intersectional thinkers, practitioners and researchers, and the value they bring to IMMA's programme. So with that said, IMMA is absolutely delighted to be one of several partners to join this very valuable series of conversations with guests from research project Full Stack Feminism in Digital Humanities for what so far has been very meaningful exchanges in addressing the intrinsic relationship between digital art practice and feminist intersectional thinking. To further introduce the Full Stack Feminist project, I'll leave it to principal investigator of the project, Janine Nanja, who works as Associate Professor in Digital Media at Munich University. She'll introduce the 2-year collaborative project that brings together a really amazing community of artists, coders, archivists and scholars across Ireland and the UK to develop digital objects, interfaces, archives and tools that can work to amplify marginalised voices. Before I pass you over to our guests, I'd like to say a very special thanks to Janine, Lawrence Hill and Catherine Nolan for bringing us all together and all the organising that goes into that from behind the scenes. Lawrence Hill is the project curator of the Full Stack Feminism and Digital Humanities, and he will be chairing this evening's discussion. And also a big thanks goes to the wonderful panel of artists for all the preparations gone into their presentations. And look, the work looks really dynamic, and I think we have a very generative discussion to have. So I'd like to also welcome the artists who are Yarli Allison, Laurie Kelly and Roibí. We're really delighted to have you all. So I won't say too much more because I'm very happy now to pass over to our guests, Lawrence and Janine, to further open the context for discussion. So I'll pass you over to Lawrence. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. Hello, everyone. I have a tendency in these moments to just like hurtle through things. So I'm just taking a moment to go, I'm really glad I'm here, and to enjoy the moment and to take a breath before I start talking and gabbling. So that's my moment. Thank you. My name's Lawrence Hill. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a curator primarily of digital art and a doctoral researcher at the University of Sussex, and most importantly for this evening, I'm the curator, as Sophie said, for this project. I'm really happy to be here, and this might not happen again, so again, just taking a moment. And thank you to Sophie for helping to organise this event. And I want to say a really big thank you to Catherine Nolan, my colleague, who some of you will know. Catherine helped to organise this event. She can't be here this evening for the very happy reason that she's on maternity leave. And she's currently, in her words, on a very wet holiday in the west of Ireland. So I'm sure will join me in sending her good wishes. I'm chairing the event today, and just to run you through events, shortly I'll be introducing my colleague, Dr. Janine Naji, to talk about the Full Stack Feminism project, and I'll pop up again to give some context to this evening's talks, and then we'll be hearing from these three outstanding artists, and we'll have a panel discussion, there'll be a Q&A, plenty of time for audience questions, and I'm going to put my foot down and say I want actual questions. Comments are welcome, but let's keep them real short and real sweet. And we'll wrap up around 7:15. So that's my first appearance. So I would like to welcome Janine to talk to me about the project.
Thanks, Lawrence. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming out. I'm delighted to see so many of you here tonight. So my name is Janine Naji. I'm the PI, which is boringly actually the principal investigator of the Irish principal investigator of the research project, because we are a collaborative project with the UK Arts and Humanities Institute. So I'm not going to keep you long from what you really came here to listen to, the artists' talks. But I want to just tell you a little bit about the research project that has organized these events, just to help give you a little bit of context. So it's a jointly funded research project by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, which is in the UK, and the Irish Research Council. It's a multidisciplinary project which is centered on the belief that intersectional feminist thinking, values, and practice can help us design, make, code, and produce for difference. So there's a link to our research collection there, which we're contributing to, and we're looking for more contributions to. So feel free to explore that and get involved. I'll explain this in a minute, is what I'm about to say. Okay, so as I said, it's a 2-year project. So its aim is to create more inclusive digital humanities practices by applying, developing, and embedding intersectional feminist approaches and praxis as a critical methodological approach across digital humanities environments, projects, and teams. So this is the digital project, but we're focused on digital humanities projects, okay? And so we want to incorporate an intersectional feminist methodology into those systems. So intersectional feminism is a bit more nuanced than what we understand as maybe traditional feminism, which focuses purely on gender. So intersectional feminism looks at it in a more complex and nuanced way to include other factors such as race, social standing, etc., etc. I am really shortening this explanation for you, okay? So there's way more to it, but I'm just trying to give you a sense of what we're doing. So we want to bring those methodologies into digital systems, specifically digital humanity systems. So what can often happen with digital systems or computer systems is that when people try and make it more open to a wider and more diverse audience, that happens at the front end, right? Once the thing is built, then they'll go, oh, how do we make this more open to everybody? What we are saying is that this needs to happen through the full stack. So full stack is a metaphor that we are using. It's a term that is used in computer systems, right? To refer to all the different layers in computer systems, from back end to middleware to front end. So quite often, trying to open up systems to a wider audience happens only at the front end. We're saying it has to happen all the way along, from the back end to the middleware to the front end, okay? And that is, in essence, is what this project is trying to do. This is our team our crack team of experts, which is a mixture of people in the University of Sussex, and in Ireland also, in Maynooth University and the Technological University of Dublin. Here is our advisory board, where we are very lucky to have, giving us advice as we go along. And that's pretty much it. I just wanted to give you a sense of the project. Here is the QR code for our survey. So please use that, fill that in. We're always looking for more information from people, more input. The entire idea of this project is to get more people involved, more inputs, more voices. And you can join the mailing list. We have a Twitter. We also have an Instagram account, and we're actually on Mastodon as well at the moment. So that's all I wanted to say to you, and I'll hand you back to Lawrence. Thank you for staying through the science bit.
Just bear with me for that awkward bit where we change slides. Mine's disappeared. Please hum amongst yourselves or in sing, that's cool. If anyone else can help, that would be. Yes. Okay, cool. Thanks, sorry about that little glitch there. Wouldn't be technology or digital without occasional glitches. Thanks, Janine, for that context. I wanted to give some background to the artist talks this evening and really around my role in this project and the role of curation. Digital art and creativity have a really central role in the Full Stack Feminism project. There are artists, poets, coders and curators on the team. And artists have been a core part of the interviews carried out for the project. We have 2 artists in residence, one from Ireland, which is Roibí, and you'll be hearing from her later, and one from the UK, Jamila Prowse. We had initially planned with Jamila to be with us this evening, but unfortunately due to ill health, she can't be. We wish her well. Roibí and Jamila are currently making work for a Full Stack Feminism exhibition in September. And it will be in Brighton in the UK, so if you happen to be in town, please do come and join us. They'll be joined by 6 other artists, including, I'm very happy to say, Lauren and Yarli, who are with us this evening. And the slideshow that is happening behind me shows all of the 8 artists that will be involved. One of the central research questions of the Full Stack Feminism project regards the decentering of traditional voices in the digital arts and humanities. I think we'll get into the question of what we mean by traditional later. I'm sure everyone has a view on what that word means in this context, but that question has informed the planning of this evening's event and the curation of the project exhibition. Thinking about that question and working on full stack feminism alongside my doctoral research has offered me the opportunity to start to think a little differently about the role of the curator and what it means in the 21st century. It's a word and a role that has a long history and has meant different things over time. The word curation comes from the Latin word curare, meaning to take care of, and the curator has largely been fixed on taking care of things. In ancient Rome, curatores were civil servants overseeing public buildings, such as aqueducts. And in medieval times, a curatus was a priest devoted to the care of souls. Slightly later, a curator was a trustee of an estate, and into the 19th century and the 20th century, we had the role defined as taking care of museum objects. And now in the 21st century, the word is widely used across many sectors. And the dynamic of the art world, specifically the role of the curator, has historically been positioned as somewhat passive, playing second fiddle to the object or the artist. Renowned curator Hans-Ulrich Obrist has said, quote, "Artists and their works must not be used to illustrate a curatorial proposal or premise to which they are subordinate," end quote. He has also somewhat dismissively separated the role of exhibition maker from the more traditional curatorial role. But in my mind, the role is less passive, has more agency, or at least it should. And the curator or exhibition maker, and I'm very happy with that designation, has a more direct role to play in making change. And change is the critical focus here. It's foundational both to my work and to the Full Stack Feminism project. Making change is important. Why else are we here? And change is needed. The art world beyond the practice of digital art is inherently and historically undiverse. A 2019 study of the collections of museums and galleries across the US showed that 85% of the artists represented were white and 87% of them were men. I recently read that the collection of the National Gallery in London is 97% by male artists. And just a reminder, it's 2023 and it's like July already. If we accept there is a grassroots to institution pipeline, then we must understand that making change at the grassroots now is the key to future institutional change. But we also need to recognise that those changes at the grassroots do not just happen. And this is where the agency of the curator comes in. We can agree that the role of the curator is to take care of something, historically museum objects or aqueducts. Might we not redefine that something in order to change what the framework within which curatorial practice functions? I increasingly think of curation as an act of care, an act of caring. And I'm thinking about this curation caring in two ways. One is tangible, it's about care and support of artists who are generally less represented in the art world. And the second is caring for and securing something more abstract but equally critical, which is the need for digital arts and the wider art world, in fact, to be better, to represent more perspectives, to be less siloed in its representations, which make it, to my mind, richer and more meaningful to more people. This is some of the thinking, as I said, behind this evening, behind the curation of the exhibition for the project, which you see behind me, and which I titled Manifestations. Because manifestations are the embodiment of abstract ideas, and they're allied to activism. A manifestation is a demonstration, I mean, quite literally in French. I'm increasingly starting to see curation and activism as having identical meanings and purposes. To borrow from curator Terry Smith, curation is about being together in a site of concentrated meaning, and, well, so is activism. Beyond the question of what traditional voices are, this evening, I'm also interested in exploring how intersectionality plays out in the work of these artists, how their lived experience informs their work, and how they, and we as a society, can square the use of tools built by mega corporations with a kind of neoliberal profit motive for a heart to make, promote, and exhibit art and ourselves. Are there alternatives? That's a really big question, and I don't think we're going to answer it, but it's something to think about. I don't have time to go into the exhibition in detail or here, but you'll likely find me clutching a really fat glass of wine after we finish here. And I'm very happy to talk more about this evening, the exhibition, or my work in general. I'm going to introduce the artists now very briefly, because it's generally better to hear from them. And I essentially lifted this from their website anyway. Yarli Allison is a Canadian-born Hong Kongese art worker based in London and Paris, with an interdisciplinary approach that traverses sculpture, installation, CGI, moving image, drawings, poetry, tattooing, and performance. Lauren Kelly is a visual artist from Dublin, primarily working in performance art from a place of social engagement. Lauren approaches her practice as a mode of activism, using the unlimited landscape of performance art to speak politics with rationality to the oppressed states of the body. Roibí is a multimedia artist and self-proclaimed pop star, using music, video animation, and digital media to explore ideas of queerness as it exists within Gen Z. What their work shares is activism that comes from lived experience, and that's what makes their work attractive and fascinating to me, and it's a really good basis for our discussion this evening. So that's enough from me, and I'd like to introduce our first artist, Yarli Allison.
Thank you. Super happy to be here. Awkward moment to pull out slides again. Oops. Yeah, buck, 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 buck. Buck, buck. I ponder on the same question. Where are you from? Where are you from? And which country is your passport? You don't seem to belong here. Or maybe try this. What is it that you'd like me to know about you? Horizon, 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 until it became vertical. The vertical historical events of Hong Kong immigration tie in 1997 brought me here. I have no clue about this new place that I have moved into, but it changed my relationship with the land. My early knowledge about this heritage city of mine was from the Western-centric Hollywood cases. And this is an ideal place, I think, for sci-fi imagination until the recent game released, Cyberpunk. I was so excited to play this game, but all I can find is that I'm in Hong Kong again. Humanoid machines. Living in vertical boxes has made me think about all these living conditions. Survival gears, protection, journeys, playing, comfortable 5-star hotel. With this boat I built, I titled, Baby, You Can Go Anywhere. Social political conditions influence how we live, how we make art, and how we relate to the world. Writer Rebecca Solnit mentioned that the origin of the word compassion was to suffer with. The connection of suffering with another person can bring compassion beyond sympathy into the realm of empathy. But my father would disagree with me on that. My father would say, keep everything to yourself. It hits me as the generation before me in my culture prefer to conceal matters and to go inwards into strength, kind of like the box that I lived in Hong Kong. So while I came here to study, my upbringing noises, I try to chuck them into the back of my mind. They say, hell no, keep concealing facts. Keep concealing things, and I say, hell yeah, let's extend this border of compassion. While I extend this suffering to others, I try to extend this boundary for care to another, and that's how I guess I feel relate to the world. And I start offering these custom tattoo drawings to my queer community who have similar experience as me, that Maybe I don't want to walk into a traditional tattoo studio. It might be too macho. Or people who are also in fighting of their rights and safety. While I expand these borders to others, I also connected with more people in the East and Southeast Asian community in the UK who also has similar feelings on belonging. And I wonder if I could interview these people that shared my intersectionality, who were not able to return to their home and memories, who were at some point living in British colonial places, who were also queer and happened to end up being somewhere, but not where they thought they could be. And it goes back to the question, where are we all going and where's the end point? With the tools of virtual reality, I picked up in Northern Ireland. I started to interview people around me and start to build home from memories. With virtual reality, I attempt to solve grief and I attempt to investigate on belonging.
So this is where I used to work before I left for London, and is now on the board of my sister living. There was a part out. I used to share about that with my sister, and another conversation about her. I was saying I only have 3 drawers and some space underneath this bed. It still has more space than I do. I have no space now. So every time I go back to Hong Kong, I need to book a hotel. These belongs play is quite rough and unrealistic. But it makes me feel like I belong. I can feel my existence just because I can almost smell it. Nothing is missing here, like my belongings, friends, and the stuff that I had. It's my memories being visualized. Actually, across the year, the furniture has never been placed together like this. But the fridge is long gone. Grandpa brought it on the 90s. I didn't realize that we illustrated the furniture I had notes. My attention to these objects is creating creative memories.
When I escaped Brexit back in 2019, I moved home to Paris just before all the embassies were closed and the flights were not running anymore. The border of the hardcore EU fortress has become a circle that defines our mobility. And as this circle tightens up, we couldn't step out from our home without signing this form, justifying why we have to step out from our door. Maybe some fresh air, I guess. But on the other side of the globe is more technological than, I guess, Europe, than just a form. Everybody must scan this QR code in order to enter places like restaurants or grocery stores with this digital auto temperature check and facial recognition. And if you don't comply with these rules, you're basically cut off by society, from society. And surely these tracking systems swings between control and care. They say it's for our safety, policymakers says. These safeties first policy also eliminated any democratic demonstrations prior to the pandemic. So I thought, we're so restricted anyways, why not throw more QR code in the public and let's gather some feedback. And as I made this public work as a wall, people can scan the QR code, but they're quite cautious to scan anything because of the security reasons. But if it's really about safety, then surely no one would mind being tracked. After I persuade people to scan the QR, there are cute cats and crying flowers, very, very, I guess, yeah, cute, childlike, and they were surrounded by these metaphorical community garden. But sadly, I only have a few options, and Instagram is one of them. For corporations and government, pandemic time was a really good time to test out these mobility and technological tests with people as the test subject. We can push the boundary of these tests, and I thought, oh, why not invite more digital surveillance into my bedroom? We can feel the powers of those in control. And here you have just unlocked yourself to become a voyeur. You can access these control lab settings and analyze people's sexy moments, maybe 35 times clockwise, clicking your left armpit while 12.4 times massaging your inner right thigh, and then you will have orgasm. They know better than what we need. And when they're hungry for our biometrical and behavioral data, they have profit and ka-ching, ka-ching. And as a reward, we'll give you feel-good hormones until a point with voice recognition, they can detect all your victims. Give us something new, we say. Give us something new with autonomy. That is really hard to preserve nowadays. And while elites in power are enjoying their instruments that helps them swallow in more and more data, we must ask for a system that is not opaque and ensure that these kind of historical inequality and inequity must not repeat in the new system that we built. And so I hope these kind of alternative realities can remind us about all these individual stories that we still have and how we want to evolve this world into. And we can maybe imagine a new future together. My name is Yarli Allison, and thank you for sharing your space with me. I will let more amazing artists to take over.
Right, I begin. Just to introduce Lauren.
So thanks for listening to me. With the drum, I thought I'd start off by doing something a bit more experimental instead of traditional artist talk. And so it's my first time doing it, and I'm still excited about that actually. Just to give context on who I am an artist based in Dublin. I am from Tallaght. And why I say that is because I think it's important to say I'm from Tallaght because it's one of the most oppressed places in Dublin. And when I say oppressed because I don't believe in saying disadvantaged area, because to say disadvantaged to me means there's something wrong with the area, but there's nothing wrong with the area. It's more so that there's an oppressor doing something to the area, the state. So I am primarily a performing artist. I graduated in 2020 from NCAD. My work is very socially engaged. Always hasn't been, but I'll get more to that in a second. What I'm at now is I have a studio in Rural Red in Tallaght. So I'm doing a residency there, and I'm in between doing performances, teaching, and at the minute I'm working on creating a performance art festival based in Tallaght, which I'm really excited about because it's the first one ever. So what I'm working on now, The Witch and the Slut. So at the minute I'm working on The Witch and the Slut, as in the way the witch was treated years ago as the way the slut is treated in society today. For example, slut shame today, being pointed out and shamed for your sexuality, and how the witch years ago was the same type of idea. So I started experimenting with images. I wanted to interlink a way that history is still shown. So I kind of go in between what's happening now in activism, what needs to be addressed, but also the past, and not forgetting where the problems came from. This is why I have the church was here written on me as a reminder of in Ireland of like the stigma that is still coming in through generations. So then I'm just gonna go on to I skipped too many. Yeah, bear with me and I'll just go into this video. So I'm gonna show you this experimental video, like a little trailer to the Witch and the Slut project. So just something to show more visually what the idea is. You know, I think it will speak for itself. Then I am going to show you this video now, and then I'm going to kind of like dissect it and tell you what it's all about, so you kind of get to the way my mind works for my art.
does it mean? The politics of the land. Travel to point. They craft you greater. Limit of transgression. Show me what I look for. I don't I found, I tried, the origin. Sound. Figures. Time. Female. Counting the flower. Religion. Your heart is yours. Although the point of search continues. You're proud, Irish. March together, emerge. Say, they wouldn't want to.
Right, I'm gonna cut her off early just so I have time to talk about it and other things. Oh, I want to go back to the presentation now. So before I actually explain that, I actually wanted to talk about this, and it's important to talk about this now because there's two of the women that took part in this protest with me are here, so I have to definitely go back to it because I kind of skipped it there. So I'll go back and explain the film now. But so we done this protest outside the Dáil. It was the same day that repeal, the 5th anniversary repeal was, and it was also the same day the new bill for repeal was going forward in terms of making access better for abortions and the healthcare system in general for reproductive rights. And so we all stood here with capes on us, some of us with our breasts out, saying the church was here, as you're seeing in the other picture. And for us, this was a really powerful piece to stand and put ourselves vulnerable in this position. There was actually guarded there at the time, and we weren't actually sure how they were going to react. Like they were going to tell us to cover up or not, but they didn't in any ways. So it all went well, and we all felt really powerful after doing an action like this, you know. So some of the women in this I know through Rosa. It's a social feminist activist group. And so I'm part of Rosa the last 3 years. So this is how I know some of the women in the photo, as well as two other women that were first-hand experiences with reproductive healthcare. And this, I've done a socially engaged kind of work like this before, where we're doing a visual as part of a protest piece, as a performance piece at the same time. But this was the first time that I've invited people to do with me in this type of sense, and it was the first time too that we actually got backlash online from far right. There was a screenshot put up online of a picture of us protesting by an Instagram page, and it had wrote on the picture, they should hang a rope around their neck and attach a brick and jump into a lake if they touch my little ones. So there's all this stuff happening online, trying to say that we were going for them, that we were trying to advocating for people just to have an abortions up to 9 months just because they want it. So it was all this misinformation, and then they started saying that we're all allowed to trans women. One, doesn't matter if we're trans, they're just being transphobic. And then to say this type of thing, it was just like shocking. I've never experienced this type of thing before from doing a visual, but I actually had to laugh and say, I'm actually taking so much from this. The descriptive words of tying something around your neck with a brick and to jump into a lake. I'm like, that is actually so performative. So in a way, I took something good from it, you know, and like the same as the other women that done this with me, we're all kind of like, oh, but also like taking something from it. But yeah, I'm going back to the video that I showed because I kind of had to go back and talk about this. It's important to. So that was the video just shown, the journey of the anti-saint. It's a mixture of live performance, staged performance, so performance to camera, as well as footage from Ireland's Eye in Ireland, just off of Ireland, across some Houghts. And I'm going to dissect it, I'm going to go back to the basics. This project is called the Anti-Saint, hence why I have this to where I am right now. This is my anti-saint persona, and it all started off with this collage. And making this collage, I didn't know where it was going to go. Sometimes you're experimental doing pieces, you don't know what's going to happen with them, but it actually developed into a whole piece of work. So as you can see, I'm interlinking. For me, it'd be doing like a performative image, adding all these digital elements, and then pushing it and seeing where it can go. It was actually shown National Concert Hall, part of the restrooms by Anya O'Hare. So Anya O'Hare works advocating for artists with disabilities. And this is when I went on then to do this performance piece, which Anya O'Hare and Tara Carroll both created. part of the kind of collective, I called it Inside the Anti-Saint, when I was still questioning what is this collage, the anti-saint, I started to think about, is a saint of today, what would a saint of today be, and what would they look like, and what like qualities would he have? So I started interlinking my own personal experiences of having autism, hence why I have the headphones, so kind of this idea of blocking out noise. And I know it's called the anti-saint, so it seems kind of like I'm trying to go against something, but in a way it's just trying to put a new spin on hierarchical figures and what they can mean in contemporary society. So this was the first live performance of the anti-saint. It was in the Palace project back in 2022. I was working with plates. So for working with plates, it's bringing in this domestic element, and then it kind of looked like, I love performance for this so much. Like, you don't plan always what you're going to do, how everything's going to be, but there might be these lovely little moments that just happen organically. So holding up the plate, I was like, this looks like holy bread, do you know, like, or it looks like the moon, like. So that's kind of the way I work. Like, I don't always plan exactly what I'm going to do. Sometimes the most beautiful things that happen in performance work just happen naturally, like by chance. And then that one wasn't part of the film, that was the first live though. This one was actually in that film that I just showed, The Hidden Defence. So just to say, when someone asks you what's your work about, it's kind of hard to say what it's about. It's about everything. It's about politics, feminism, being disabled, and then history. So this one was very much kind of interlinking the part of the history part. And so called The Hidden Defence, I done this performance in the National Botanic Gardens in Dublin, part of the Sculpture and Context. And so this consisted of, you've seen a bit of it in the film, walking around, but while I was walking around these gardens, which I actually find really interesting because it's man-made nature, you know, like, oh, this is so lovely, you get to perform in nature, but it's like just this interesting kind of artificial thing to it that it's man-made. But in any case, I was walking around and I had weapons hidden in different areas of the gardens, and I was collecting them and putting them in the pram. And I've done this type of performance before, where you get everyone to follow you as part of the trail. So it's kind of like, if they want to watch the performance, they have to follow you on this trail, which I always find an interesting kind of dynamic in performance work. And then here are some of the objects we've seen in the film. Like, even though I do performative work, it links back into sculpture too. You can see I call them like the objects of the anti-saint. I feel like I said, something might start from something simple as collage, then it kind of maps out into nearly like its own little world. It has its own little place to be, its own objects, its own chair. And then, like, as you can see, like, I have the shibari ropes then on my rocking chair, part of the anti-saint. This kind of, for me, feeds into coming from a Catholic background and actually being like what I'd consider Catholic now, and the idea of restricted sexuality by putting the shibari ropes onto the chair. And then you can see here then it is metal skirt that I had in the pram at the time too, in that performance, as well as cast of the 1916 pistol gun that was used in the 1916 Rising. Why I mentioned that is because I was actually really, like, in the Hidden Defence performance, I was really inspired by the Cumann na bun. The Cumann na bun is a 1914 paramilitary organisation, women's group. They done a lot of, they played a big role that's not always remembered in the 1916 Rising. And one of the things they did was they transported weapons from Holt Harbour for fighting for Ireland. And this is where I got this idea from, the idea of putting the weapons in the garden into the pram. So, like, even though, like, everything looks so random, you're like, what am I watching? What is going on in these type of things? But every little detail for my work would be like, there's a reason. But then there's also these little things that just happen, and it's like, oh, cool. And yeah, so it was really, for me, being inspired by Irish history, is a big thing, because for a lot of the time I didn't really feel like I am Irish, but I'm like didn't feel Irish because I have a Chinese heritage. It's part of Chinese heritage that I don't really know. So it was kind of like these complex issues with identity for me. So kind of being inspired then by Irish history gave me a sense of empowerment in the work, as well as women that done fantastic things. But I'm just going to say though, as artists and as people that do research and stuff, you should always talk to people about your research. Like, because I actually could not believe this. I'm going to get so excited now in a minute telling you this. About the fact that I was talking to me nanny, went around having a cup of tea, and she was like, what you working on now? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm just researching into the coming of on and just like whatever, not thinking that she like even cared that much or whatever. Like, and she turns around and she goes, oh, your nanny, your great nanny was part of the coming of on. And oh my god, I couldn't believe it. It was one of them moments where you're like, you feel like you're on the right track with your work. It's going where you want it to go, and making these kind of connections. So then I ended up getting onto from family members then, and got the archives. So my great-grandmother, Rose McInerney, was part of coming on. And I just love, like, I got these documents off someone. She was locked up in Camainon jail and everything. There's even, like, a story going around, about her that seemingly she was slapped by Eamon De Valera at some stage in the prison. And I'm just like, what? I need to know all about this, like, you know? But anyways, I think this is her writing. It says, we won't give up our homeland without another blow. And it's just like, oh, this is so deadly. Like, I actually love working with archives, you know, interlinking activism and doing protest things, but also linking in the history and where like this came from. So then to make them personal connections for me, it's just mind blowing, you know. But what I found crazy was she was actually brought to Camainon jail, but a year before that I performed in Camainon jail, part of my degree piece, in NCAD called Fighting Voices, which I was like, I can't believe I'm at there performing there, and I didn't even know she was locked up there till after, like. And part of this piece was me, I had this costume piece, like it was like 3 tiers, the whole idea of amplifying voices that aren't heard, like traditional voices that don't get a look in. And what I did was I made me 4 sound piece, and I went around to each cell and played the sound piece into each cell to give like the ancestors that were there before, the political prisoners and what they did, a bit of sound, to make a bit of sound for them, you know, like. And this piece always reminds me of COVID and what happened in COVID, because only for COVID happened I wouldn't have been able to do this. There's no way I was renting out that space when it was still opened, like, well, all day, like, so, like, yeah. There was literally, yeah. So for me, I started by looking into the mother and baby homes before I moved into here, because I was looking at activists and other things, other people that done great things for Ireland, and I ended up looking into Rosie Hackett, if any of you know her. And
there's a bridge in town.
Yeah, the bridge in town, Rosie Hackett Bridge. Yeah, I was looking into her. But this is actually, so Fighting Voices, this is actually part of a project of 3 performances. One of them actually happened here at IMMA, but I'm not going to talk about that one today. I'll talk about the second one now. This one was, I walked to the National Archives of Ireland with this block of ice, and it was about redacted archives. Like I was saying, I was looking at the mother and baby homes, and like this was when the scandal was kind of like really big in Ireland, what's happened. So I walked, and then, like I said, I got an audience to follow me. Had this black piece of ice, I had my dad's documents inside, and the black piece of ice was dripping as I walked. And why I walked to the National Archives was because the idea of whose history gets recorded and whose doesn't, and who gets to say whose history gets recorded. So this was, for me, was a personal kind of project. And yeah, I'm just thinking of something else I want to say about that. But yeah, Rosie Hackett, yeah. So the National Archives used to actually be Jacob's factory, and Jacob's factory, it was where Rosie Hackett used to work, and that's where she started the Dublin famous lockout in 1913. So kind of linked to her, and then this kind of led me then, because I got inspired through this, because I feel like my research was this trail of journeys. It went from the National Archive to Kilmainham, then from researching into Rosie Hackett and the stuff she did, you know. So I was very inspired by her at the time. And then this is my first performance piece that I did that was part of a protest. It was the Shadow Epidemic 2020. It was when we were having the COVID pandemic, but also there was this other pandemic happening that nobody was talking about, gender violence, the rise in gender violence. So I stood with the gloves. It was kind of like, I didn't really know what to call it at first, what I was doing, because I didn't really see other people doing it at the time, doing performative like protests, and so not like, I was scared at first, to be honest, standing there. But then like I said, I'm part of Rosa, so I ended up having this community around me that really helped me and supported the work I was doing and got involved with my work. And this is when I first started to make work that was socially engaged. And then these are a few more images then of performative protests that I've done over the years. You can see that like have the drum, the weapons, and like interlink, like getting other people to come into things and that, inviting them if they want to be involved in these things. And then this was just the work, the performance that I done just before I started doing more socially engaged work. Project DNA. This was about trying to find my own ancestry. It involved me doing a DNA test, ancestry test, to find out which type of Asian I was, because for a long time I didn't know. I just knew a part of me was Asian. And why I done it was because I was looking at the mother and baby home scandal. So part of this research, I had to go and look for a location of a mother and baby home, and I found it in the Thomas Dictionary in Tala Library. I found the location of where a mother and baby home that my dad was located in. So this was very site-specific performance, which I do a lot. Like, I like to know like why this area, what about this area. So it involved me writing words got to do with the archives on the ground and scrubbing them up. And I was writing on the ground the right to know where you come from, and I was scrubbing that up again. And this was actually, because I was started doing the walk around the mother and baby homes, this is how I got into activism, because I remember contacting Ruth Coppinger, a former TD. She is the co-founder of Rosa. And I remember just contacting her, not really knowing what I was contacting her for, and just being like, hey, heard you done this, like telling her my story. And like, I have to say, she's actually amazing, like, because she actually gave me time of day and listened to me and then put me on to Rosa. And ever since I've been part of them, and it's been great. And then just the last thing I want to say, the personal and the political, the main thing about my work is about trying to research in different types of ways, and a way of it all coming from inside me, all this stuff, all these emotions, who I am. I always say that we all are the experts of our own experience, so we all have been oppressed one way or another, you know. But then it's also then reaching out to others, actually making work that actually matters socially. Like, I couldn't, like, for me personally, I have to make work that's going to have some sort of social impact. They can't be just making work to look nice too. So I'll just end it there. Thanks.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank
So,
you.
we have Roibí. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Roibí O'Rua. I am a multimedia artist, self-proclaimed cyborg and pop star. I come from a working class background in Waterford, and I identify as a trans woman, and my pronouns are she, they. So here is just, I don't know, the first word that came into my head was mirage. uh, which I feel does kind of resonate with my work, which is very chaotic. But here is a kind of collection of selected works that tell the journey of my practice. So when I was graduating from my course, Sculpture and Combined Media, in the Limerick School of Art and Design, it was the height of the COVID pandemic. As a result of that, I kind of responded to the limitations that were put on me with knowing that I wouldn't have a physical degree show, knowing that I couldn't really invite people in, despite being in a sculptural course, that I needed to make some core changes to my practice. This led me to look more introspectively and more digitally, I suppose, and kind of referring to my own history with technology, because I've always been laptop based, and kind of just reflecting on that and creating work that was solely meant to be experienced through a screen or through digital interaction. And that culminated in an album and a website and some music videos called Digitran. The Digitran, which I'll get to later, is an archetype of the trans person within Gen Z whose identity would not exist in the form that it does without the interception of the cyberspace. I was very, very privileged to get to collaborate with my dear friend who is here today, Fiona Gordon, alongside Amy Lien and Enzo Camacho on their mural, the third iteration of the Angry Christ for EVA International Phase 2 2021. Big mouthful, but it had to be broke up into phases because of COVID. But that really showed me the importance of research and collaborative research and kind of letting others into your practice, because again, my work has always been very introspective. I've always been a very introverted person, and not as much anymore, but I grew up very introverted. I was the little gamer kid, and it really showed me, this project, this mural really showed me the value of opening my work and my research and my areas of interest up to others and allowing them to inform me and for me to inform them back. I was also lucky enough to have been selected as a finalist for the RDS Visual Arts Awards in 2021. Listen off my accolades. But for that, I showed one of my music videos that I had refined. I'd never intended for that music video to be shown. I thought it would be some sort of way for people to experience the website. But I'm glad that I had the chance to revisit that video and track Pussy and Pixel Tekken, which is kind of like a double feature, 2 songs that kind of tell the experience of what it is to be a trans person who expresses their transness through a digital methodology. I, obviously growing up in Ireland, and I'm from a working class background, never really had the opportunity to develop the language around my gender identity and my experience of gender. And as a result of that, all of that play and experimentation happened online through video games, through virtual worlds, and Pussy and Pixel Tekken kind of were a way for me to express that. After that, I was part of Project Art Centre's Shortcuts programme in 2022, and Digitran has kind of become my entire practice. I thought it would just be one project for my degree show, but I'm definitely not ready to let her die or fade into obscurity. And I carried on her kind of narrative or the exploration of this idea of the archetype of a trans person who is both online and offline, this cyborg tranny, with Digitran Reloaded, and that kind of fleshed me out to where I am now and what I'm doing for the Full Stack Feminism residency, which will come up again in a minute in a further slide. And then alongside there, music is an integral part to my practice. They work hand in hand. I think it's kind of an homage to queer culture and how queer culture, from what I know of it, and also I have a background in drag performance and nightlife, I don't think I would be able to articulate anything about my identity without music. It's so important to the expression of queer subculture and so integral to so many aspects of queer identity. So here is a little GIF I made of my own gender timeline. My goal with this was to try and make it look like it was someone's Bebo page in 2009. I hope it's giving. But I have just some kind of thoughts that came into my head when I was looking through all these pictures. I never knew I was a boy, and that is true. I didn't. When I was born, this really funny joke was played by one of my uncles on another one of my uncles, where he didn't know what the sex of the baby was. And my other uncle wanted to embarrass him and said, "Oh, Caroline," my mum, "had a baby girl." Little did he know he was foretelling a prophecy. But my other uncle went and bought an "It's a Girl" card and a little pink dress, and my mother dressed me up in this dress and took a photo because, oh my God, it's so funny. Could you imagine? Robbie was born a girl. And I was. But that kind of, I think, is this really ironic thing of even throughout my childhood, throughout my experience of being presented by my family as a boy in society, I've had this natural feminine energy, this natural inclination towards femininity and womanhood, that even as a baby in the pram, all strangers thought that I was a girl. Even going into a pub for a carvery restaurant or a carvery dinner with my father at the weekend, the chef would turn around to me and my sister and say, "Hey girls, what can I get yous?" Even though I had a step, I was in an Adidas tracksuit, they just thought I was tomboy. But yeah, it wasn't until I was in school that I kind of experienced that pushback of someone saying, "You're not a girl." And I had to ask my mother, what did they mean? I grew up in a single parent family and grew up in a house with my mother and my sister. So all I knew was femininity, all I knew was womanhood. And it wasn't until external forces questioned that the colours kind of desaturated for me, and I truly started to experience gender dysphoria at about 4 years old. But I kind of thought up this pipeline, and that's kind of what this GIF is showing. The gender non-conforming child, me as a baby in a dress, to kind of gamer kid, which I always was, again, the cyberspace, the gaming world, virtual worlds, the Sims, forums, blogs, everything was a chance for me to express my true identity without the proper language or physicality to do so in real life, away from keyboard. And then I was a faggot in makeup, which I really, really loved. That was kind of my entryway, you know, through YouTube and popular culture. That's when I was a teenager, YouTube started to really come up and be a big thing. And it was kind of normalized in a sense to see gender nonconformity in people who are male-bodied, with figures like Jeffree Star, James Charles, even though they're like, ooh, now, but they weren't at the time. And that kind of allowed me to have an excuse to embrace my identity. And through social media, through my blogs, my 20 Tumblrs that I had, my deviant art, I was able to express this aspect of womanhood that I had internally that wouldn't have come to fruition if I didn't have access to the internet. So yeah, I'll go on to the next slide. Okay, what is a digitron? This is a screen grab from my website, digitron.com. So a digitron is the trans individual whose identity has largely been informed by the cyberspace, or a trans individual who expresses their identity within the cyberspace, and thirdly, a bad bitch. I'm all three. So this one quote I have there that I wrote is something that does really still resonate with me. It's the feeling of being up past your bedtime, playing a PlayStation on a school night, getting to dip your toes into your identity in the character selection screen. That is what being digitron is. The radical metamorphosis that the cyberspace grants a young tran. And it's so true. So my work focuses on this kind of snapshot of how technology and how the digital space can allow those who are struggling with their physical gender, those who may be trans, those who are trans, to fully embody the version of themselves that they know that they are without physical limitations. And to this day, I still do it. When I create myself in The Sims, which I regularly do, I create myself with an idealized body. But cis people do that too. You know, if we're like, I'm plus size, and I know that other plus size people, when they're making their Bitmoji on Snapchat, don't pick the fat one. You know, and it's things as simple as that. We all utilize technology to amplify our own version of ourselves, our own reflection as we see it. And that's kind of what interests me in my practice. So yeah, this was my degree show work, which I kind of touched on already. So I'll leave this here for a second and then move on. Okay, and then Reloaded was a continuation of the Digitron. And I'd gotten very tired of Digitron at that point. This was kind of the point where I was like, oh, will I drop her? Will I keep her going? And I decided to keep her going through the Project Art Centre Shortcuts programme. But I was really wondering, what would the Digitron's response be to the real world? You know, the first time was really just establishing who she was and what she is. But this time I was like, what would she think of my day-to-day? What would she think of my experience of having to shave in the morning? She doesn't have to do that. She's made of bits and bytes. She's an image on a screen. What would she think of me opening a dating app and being fetishized from the moment that I log on? She doesn't have to deal with that. She can log off. She can hack them, you know. So that's kind of what this was. And it was this world building. That's what I consider a lot of my work to be, is world building, this creation of a visual culture around something that doesn't necessarily exist. And I was trying to build this concept of a world or a game that she would exist within, where kind of like a Doom style thing, where she'd go and shoot up all the cis people she doesn't like. I know we're not meant to be that kind of violent. I know we're meant to be like diplomatic, but I don't know, I'm not at this point anymore. But this brings us on to the work I'm producing for the Full Stack Feminism residency. It's called Revelation Revolution. If you have noticed a pattern, each of these iterations are named after a Matrix film. So this one is meant to be a battle cry, claiming the world-ending power of the othered. I'm really, really interested in what people are calling the transgender debate or transgender ideology. It's so funny to me that as a community that's so fringe, so othered, the opposition puts this almost apocalyptic power in our hands and speaks about us as if we can end the world and that we are ending society. We're indoctrinating the children. So through this work, I want to imagine, what if we did? I love this kind of eldritch nature of transness that's in the media at the minute. And I really want to explore it in this work. And again, it's world building. It's exploring what I'm calling the tranny apocalypse. So this is a peek inside my sketchbook. None of this is finished work. I would hope that's obvious. But one thing I was playing around with was this idea of, so I made a fake Shein ad for a guillotine cock ring, and this idea of forced feminization, sissification, the yassification of society. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Is I'm tired. I'm really tired of trying to navigate a cis-normative society, and so I want to end it and make it a trans-normative society, and that's what this work will represent. Definitely in terms of, I'm hoping it'll be all propaganda posters to indoctrinate everyone who comes in to view it. And then going forward, I don't know if I've rushed through this, but going forward, one thing I've always said whenever anyone asks, what's next for you? What do you want to do in the future? I always reference this Vine because it's true. I want to be famous. I'm a self-proclaimed pop star. That says enough, you know, and I'm really interested in just pushing forward and being radically and undeniably trans and queer and punk and working class, and bring that forward through my artwork. So thank you.
I will say the last time I spoke to Rob Disney, I had 2 words written in my notebook afterwards, which were agility and cockring. After a time, someone finds those notebooks. There's going to be a bizarre thing going on.
We're passing the mic.
Hello. Is this working? Yeah, cool. We're not to schedule in the slightest, and that is absolutely fine. I really enjoyed all those presentations so much. So we're going to kind of skip the panel discussion because I really want to bring you all in and to have some questions from you to our 3 artists. So I am throwing the floor this way. So now you literally have to come up with a question. Anybody? Oh, please, no, go.
Sorry, just to get the ball rolling, I loved your last presentation. It was fantastic. And I wonder, are you like interested in or drawing on, like we were just kind of saying something about utopianism and suppose that kind of theory, you know, because what you're doing in these worlds of, as like a country girl who lived her life on homestead, not really vampires there was, it was, you know, you create your own cipher or your own project, as you so eloquently said, your identity onto this digital world. So are you interested in that kind of like utopian theory and stuff? I'm thinking, you know, in terms of like borders, we're seeing a lot of discussion about that, and you know, invisibility of borders, not accepting borders. I wonder if is that something that piques your interest as well in these worlds that you're creating?
It definitely is something that piques my interest. I will say my approach oftentimes is less academic, and I don't really think of certain theories or concepts as much in depth until the work starts being produced. So it is something that's like in my bookmarks to look into a bit more, because it was something that came into mind. And actually, the one thing that drove me away from outright saying utopian or utopia when discussing the work is because of this episode of Charmed that I saw as a child, where I forget that there was this group, the society of like demigod type people who turned the world into a utopia, and it seemed awful. And even at that, like, I for the longest time have always said to my mother, much to her distress, that I didn't want to go to heaven when I died because it seemed boring. And I kind of still stand by that. So I don't think that this transnormative world would be a utopia, because I think queerness is chaos, and chaos is not utopian, if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yes, so they were all brilliant talks. Thank you very much. So I might ask Lauren this. You know, how do you see your work feeding into some of what I was talking about in terms of intersectional feminism in digital humanities? How can that contribute to that and maybe open things up?
Yeah, for me, I before I decided something was about something, it was already about it. You know, all the layers of the digital humanities and feminism was there before I decided, oh, okay, I'm going to start making work about this type of things, you know? And for me, linking it into performance is in the live, and how can I make my work go beyond the live? And this is where I bring into video into my work, and how you can overlay things and how you can make things happen that can't always happen, you know, so you can make time go backwards, and these type of things can happen. So for me, it'd be linking in with the idea of playing with time, and also of how you can bring in the past and the present into something, and how it's important to remember the past when we're going forward in society, so history doesn't repeat itself, but also so we're self-aware and this type of thing. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Anyone else have a question before I start my list? Anybody? I mean, maybe we could just pick up on that intersectionality point, and maybe Yarli, do you want to just talk through maybe how intersectionality kind of plays out in your work?
I sometimes forget who I am because I think as multimedia artists that you all can relate, and also from different backgrounds, like it's pretty great that we can kind of camouflage into any kind of funding proposal that we apply for sometimes, and but thinking about this kind of aspect, I think we're in a very lucky stage that we can be the digital self that we want to be, and then in this kind of mobility where we can enter different borders and kind of claim identity into our advantage. But in my work, I haven't mentioned that maybe in reverse to you, my kind of great grandmother was from a British heritage, and also from the 1900s. And since then, I've been researching about this 100 years of Chinese diaspora in the UK. But yeah, there was no UK at that time. I was just thinking, like, how did they meet, like, romantically? Like, how would this Chinese person meet someone who's like quite far away when there's no like system? But maybe figured out that the ancestor sign up a contract in their homeland, and then but in the British colony, and then they found their way to this kind of society, and then got married, and or maybe have children. And so all these kind of discrimination and biases, kind of how do you say, top-down approach that maybe my ancestor has experienced, like, have passed down to me as well, and maybe that explains why I'm in this system as well. And so, like, how history not repeat ourselves, and all these are showed in our living, in our breathing, and so maybe someone can relate to this, I guess.
What about you? Any thoughts on your practice in intersectionality?
Great, thank you. Yeah, I would say I had a point and it completely zoop. I think my practice is inherently intersectional because it's so introspective. Like, it's very, very vain, and it is all about me. And my identity is intersectional. You know, I'm working class, I'm trans, I'm plus size. All of these things play a role in my work. And I think in particular in my methodologies and the visual language that I use, like, I don't like to have the most polished aesthetic to the digital creations I make. I want them to look like someone made them on their blog, or someone made them on TikTok when they were 16, or they're using free apps like Pixar. They're not using Photoshop. I am using Photoshop. Do you know how hard it is to make something on Photoshop look like it wasn't made on Photoshop? But that's very much an area that interests me, even though my social class and my social background isn't really addressed in the work itself. Definitely through practice it is, and through the methods that I use and the visual language that I use. But I think I hope that answers the question relatively.
Lauren, do you have anything to
Yeah, I was just going to say it's the same for me. Like I was saying, you don't actually say, right, one day I'm going to make work about this. You kind of, you, the person that's making the work, straight away, it's going to be part of who you are because it's coming from you. And how we can kind of make that happen and interlink to, like, how it can project on the world and how the world looks in the terms of the digital language that we use and the way we even speak to one another. And like I'd love to, like, just thinking now of like our works all together, of like I'd love to see like something happen of like how could like you bring the use our works in the video and the digital sense and the identity. And like for me, I'm like immediately thinking of our identities relating of how for me I don't know my Chinese family, and then how it's kind of this like weird complication of trying to say you're part of someone. For even when I'm saying it, I'm kind of like, I probably shouldn't say that, I'm not enough Chinese to say that. And how it's kind of like, how do you own that and be okay with that, you know? And then with you, you're coming in being like, yeah, this is the way I am and I'm vain, and I absolutely love it, like, you know, like, so I just love like the contrast in our practices like so much.
I mean, one of the things that I was thinking when I was watching all of your presentations was, and this is kind of ties in with digital as well, is a sort of sense of boundlessness, and that digital spaces to me are inherently kind of queer spaces because, you know, they're ones and zeros, but they can be either or neither or both, you know, and anything can be anything in that space. And I think that's something that kind of, well, it united your work for me, this kind of sense of freedom and a sense of boundlessness. I wonder if you had any thoughts of that kind of sense of just like freedom in that space.
Well, I would say like that's kind of, I think what my work explores is this idea of liberty through digital means and digital expression. I find my practice really freeing as well. It's kind of, I think I might have said this to you, Lawrence, in our meeting last. I've definitely said it to a few people since anyway. But what I like about my practice is that it gives me the opportunity to express and feel my emotions and use my voice, because I'm stuck as a trans woman in this really awkward position where if I show any kind of passion, whether it be anger or sadness, I'm both perceived as the male aggressor and the hysterical woman. And through my art practice, that doesn't have to matter, you know, and if that's what you take away from it, then great. You know, like it's meant to be a bit provocative and push buttons from my point, but it allows me the opportunity to not really care and use the label of art or creativity as an excuse to just be a bit mad, you know?
Yeah, I was just saying that, like, it kind of, for me with performance, it's giving me that space to use my body in the most crazy ways. But like sometimes I do things, I'm like, why am I even doing that? Like, see that video that I showed you was called The Slut? Like, I was like, even the other day when I was recording that, I was doing these things and I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this, but it's coming from your subconscious and it means something, you know, like this type of way of like really just letting this all come out from your subconscious into your body. And for you then, you're bringing it into the creations you make, you know, in the digital realms. Whereas to me, I'd be more like going into the performative realms, extension into the digital, but back to the basics of the body for me, you know. I'm not like the best with language and stuff being autistic. Like I don't have all this mad like academic knowledge of the like fancy words, and I'm an advocate for that because I believe that by using fancy words and like you know what I mean, like it kind of excludes people that don't understand and they're afraid then, you know, like. So I try not to even be like that because I'm not like that, you know. So it's just being yourself and just being the maddest part of yourself.
I know, because we talk about, I don't know, in art school we're forced to be very, you know, precise in our languages and theories, academic. But I think like our mutual thing here is that like we don't care. Like we just want to express whatever. And I really love this fluidity in practices. You mentioned, it was hard to do something that doesn't look like Photoshop while you're using Photoshop, and that's really great because I think as artists we tend to get lazy nowadays with AI really being really helpful. We just don't even think nowadays like how like you know a lot of on Photoshop you have the color palette, and a lot of artists just pull it to the neon colors because that is just the most convenient, the most powerful, brightest color, and we just lose autonomy like slowly nowadays. And I love all these rough grassroots looking languages that we're trying to make there.
I mean, that does really beg questions about how the platforms that we use dictate, drive our work. But that's a really huge question, and I don't think we've really got time for that now, because I do want to just give the audience a kind of last opportunity to ask anything that you just... Please.
How do you deal with burnout? Because I imagine because you're using such or you're exploring such heavy kind of emotionally charged systemic topics, it's like, how do you deal with kind of dry spells in your practice? I would say for me, my work kind of very obviously is quite satirical and could fall under pastiche. So I kind of avoid emotional burnout to an extent because I take everything as a joke in my work. I approach it as if it's something to be deconstructed and laughed at. Because I am a perpetual doom scroller in my, outside of my practice. So, yeah, if that answers the question, it's something I just try to avoid by not taking my topics too seriously, even though they are very kind of profound things to be exploring.
For me, I experienced that after I was making work around the mother and baby homes. I was like, oh my God, I'm looking at the news every day. This is so heavy. This relates to me so personally. I cannot deal with this. But I remember I actually had a great tutor, Brian Hand, teaches in NCAD, and he really encouraged me. He was like, but do you want this to happen again? What happened to your family? And I was like, no, I don't want it to happen again. So, it was kind of just the idea of taking a break when you need it, but then you just see all these things happen, and I can't just sit aside and do nothing, even if it's not, doing major changes. But in my way, it's my way of fighting, So that kind of gives me the motivation to get up and go again, and having that support around me of other activists. Yeah.
Well, self-care. But yeah, I did had a major burnout. My body just collapsed in pandemic time, lockdown, 28 days quarantine, trying to get out of this Curao code prison, while navigating 8 different projects. Yeah, so I think there's really no way out for artistic burnout, but I think the best way is to learn to say no. And as my therapist, thank you, therapist says, she say, the moment you say no, it's giving space to yourself. And I think being selective, I don't know if that solves your problem, but don't watch the news nowadays. But yeah, thank you for your question.
Anyone else? Yes.
I want to come back to Lawrence's presentation and talk about curation. And I'm wondering whether you've had positive, negative experiences with curation, and or what might need to be done to achieve that care, curation as care that you were talking about. Any insights there?
I mean, I just very briefly also to slightly answer your question. One of the things that I've done as a curator, working with artists, working with difficult subjects, is to, and also when I was teaching with students that were kind of doing MA dissertations and looking at far right groups and things like that, and just saying, making sure that they're taking care of themselves as well, and potentially being a kind of conduit for them to kind of vent towards. But in terms of your experiences of curation and curators.
Well, I'm actually pretty inexperienced in terms of dealing with curators, in the sense that I haven't exhibited my work much. And I think it's because of the limitations of up until this residency with full stack feminism, really, that my work was designed to be disseminated online. And I think a lot of the challenges that I would have faced, that's the right way to phrase it, were kind of avoided that way, because it was just, at the end of the day, my work was going up on a website, you know, and there wasn't much more to think about outside of that. Yeah, literally, it was like, click, upload, done, you know. I did, with the RDS Visual Arts Awards, work with Vera Clute, who was the curator that year, and throughout exhibitions in college, but curators were usually lecturers, and you could curse each other out and get angry and have it not be that big of a deal. But so far, working with Lawrence has been very nice. Very thoughtful curator. Yeah. Handed me a $5.
For me, I haven't worked that much with creators either, just a few bits. Like, I am working on my first role as a curator with the Performance Art Festival in Tallaght called Uproot in Tallaght. And I actually love it. I love, like, organising. I think I'm a little organised freak, you know. I love having all my little lists done and stuff, so it's really enjoyable. And, like, that sense of care, when you were talking about that, I was like, I didn't know that kind of. But it makes sense, you know, that you care for a person, you look after them, you make sure they have everything, and you be inclusive to that, like, and make sure everyone has the equal opportunities. So, yeah.
Music is here. Let's go dance. But hi. Hi. Yeah, or two of them. Yeah, just last thing, I think, working with quite a few curators, the people that I felt most caring is the ones that doesn't take artists as just a culture capital. They don't capitalize from artists. You can really feel the difference, and I think that's the only thing I can say.
So the music has started. I'm sure there are drinks to be drunk somewhere. So it just remains for me to say thank you to Yarli, to Lauren, to Roibí, to Janine, and to Sophie again for helping to organise this, and thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it.